It is a Sunday, so we're going to check fashion.
Yes, let's do it. Let's dive in.
And Fashion Week has wrapped up in Sydney with international designer Oscar de la Renta bringing the event to a close with a presentation of high-end glamour wear.
The success of the year's event has been attributed in part to its rebranding as a resort wear showcase celebrating the unique aesthetic of Australian designers and the lifestyle that so many around the world covered. Well, for more on this and other highs and lows from fashion's biggest week, we're joined by fashion writer Patty Huntington. Good morning to you. Okay, let's start with the high, obviously the pinnacle, which was the end of the week, Oscar de la Renta.
Fantastic. Now, of course, not an Australian designer, but I mean, wonderful for the event to secure such a major international name. I mean, Oscar de la Renta, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, is one of the sort of stalwarts of the sort of New York fashion calendar. It's been around for a very long time, and it was just high-end glamour, absolutely beautiful, lots of cocktail evening dresses. And I think it was, you know, it was a fantastic achievement for the event to get someone like that to come down. And he was one of 4 New York-based brands. Oscar de la Renta was one of 4 New York-based brands to show.
Hopefully we got some vision of that, of the Oscars fashion there we can talk about.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, and I mean, people often, or sometimes, you know, criticise the make of some of the Australian collections, and I mean, you know, it was just absolutely superlative sort of craftsmanship. And when you go backstage, I mean, you sort of see the shoes and the jewellery and the sunglasses, and it's all Oscar de la Renta branded, of course, because that's how the luxury people do it. And I think...
The luxury people, you mean the wealthy?
Well, no, the luxury brands do
Right.
it. You know, you don't have a show and you have someone else's sunglasses.
Right.
Perhaps they may be a sponsor. You have your whole brand. And I think it steps up the game for the Australians. I mean, you know, many of them are showing internationally, and of course some of them got their own licenses. But I think it's the overall branding of a brand, and I think it steps up the game for the Australians and raises the bar. Cynthia Rowley also from New York came down to show. Now, of course, they were invited, and there would have been sweeteners from the New South Wales government and the sponsors, but still it's a big deal to sort of get on a plane and travel for 24 hours. I mean, Australians do it all the time, but I spoke to Cynthia Rowley backstage before her show, and she was saying it was kind of surreal. She thought she was sort of hallucinating at one point at one of the airports, but I mean, it was she said, well, why not, you know? And I mean, it's...
So this is swimwear.
This is Cynthia
and it's wetsuits.
That's right. Well, she's a surfer, and she launched a line of wetsuits about sort of 6 years ago. But they're absolutely fantastic, these colour-blocked wetsuits. I mean, and this was one of 5 or 6 different brands to do this. And this is one of the big trends of the week, I think, the sort of the fashion wetsuit or fashion rash vest, or fashy, as some people are calling it. A fashy. Yeah. A number of Australian brands were doing it too. But they looked fantastic on the runway, and at the end they all came down en masse. So,
well, it sounds perfect for Australia, because obviously we pride ourselves, particularly in terms of our climate, swimwear, those sorts of things, resort wear. That's been a shift, hasn't it?
Of course, that's right. And I mean, you know, the event previously was spring-summer, but for the international buyers, I mean, they've seen the spring-summer collections in September in the Northern Hemisphere, and they've just finished buying for winter. Resort is sometimes known as cruise, and it originally was for sort of wealthy people who go on, you know, to Palm Springs in the middle of winter, and so retailers needed something in that November, December window.
But are we looking at beachwear on the street? Essentially. But I mean, God forbid we're actually going to see rashies worn.
Well, who knows?
Don't rule it out.
As the hole in the ozone layer gets bigger and bigger, there might be the need for it. But I mean, you know, Cynthia, I think, seemed unaware that we're sort of like the melanoma capital of the world. It makes a lot of sense here. It doesn't make so much sense necessarily in Northern Europe. But I mean, this is another sort of example of something that's, you know, fashionable but functional. And she's a surfer herself. She actually came to Australia in 2010 to first launch her line of wetsuits with the Roxy brand. And she made her bow. Some of the models were carried out by, they were 4 Bondi life surf, and she made her bow on a surfboard as well. So good on her. I mean, she went sort of above and beyond.
She did indeed. She embraced it. Well, speaking of all things Australian, how were the Aussie designers?
Fantastic. I mean, there were some really wonderful presentations. Not just the sort of the runway shows at the main venue, but also people really took advantage, as they often do. But they really took advantage of sort of the best that Sydney's got to offer in terms of. I mean, Camilla did a fantastic presentation. She actually basically hijacked 150 people for 2 hours, considering that most fashion shows run sort of 10, 15 minutes. She took them out on this 45-metre party boat and did this amazing presentation of her sort of African tribal influenced resort wear, and everyone has been raving about it. Particularly fantastic for the international buyers to come and see Sydney Harbour, which they might not get a chance to do during their normally very busy schedule. Romance Was Born did a beautiful presentation inspired by Liberace, apparently, down at a mansion, the Carthona mansion collection in Point Piper, and that was absolutely beautiful too. You could hear the water lapping sort of on the sandstone walls.
There we are.
And just absolutely, I mean, another trend of the week was this heavy embellishment. We saw that in many collections.
And
So,
buckles.
What's that?
well, it's something inspired. You can see the piano notes.
Piano keys and what have you.
And inside this incredible, it's a Gothic revival mansion. It was just, I mean, this is outside, but we were all sitting inside amongst all the antiques, and it was really just breathtaking. And the styling was fantastic as well. So that was another highlight. I mean, Manning Cartel showed their collection at the north end of the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Okay.
Again, the harbour location, and there was some sort of great resort wear in that too. So it's not just about the collections; it's about how you present them. And I mean, when you've got the backdrop of Sydney Harbour, why not take advantage of it? Because I should point out that the resort season, which was always like an in-between season, it's getting bigger and bigger. And the big brands like Chanel just showed in Havana. Took 700 people to Havana to do a big resort presentation. Louis Vuitton is about to go to Rio. Why not come to Sydney to do your resort presentation?
Well, and I've got to say, Patty, particularly given the weather we're having at the moment, which is the endless summer.
It is the endless summer, absolutely. The weather sort of, the temperature just sort of dipped slightly, and you saw a couple of people come out with fur items, but really, that's right, it is the endless summer.
Well, and that's why you're wearing flowers today.
Exactly, even though this is actually from a winter collection.
Spring has sprung a little early. Now, do tell us, there were though some low points you found.
Well, you have your highs and lows of every week. Something that everyone thought would be the absolute highlight turned out to be something that Dion Lee, who is one of Australia's sort of brightest fashion stars, chose to show on the 28th floor of the Bloomberg building in Bligh Street, which is the Bloomberg Bank and the news service. 400 people, 3 elevators. I mean, an amazing rooftop location, but perhaps it might have been better to show it in the daytime or at sunset or just have some lights. But there just didn't seem, apart from the photographer's area...
Well, you couldn't see it.
Well, most of the people, I mean, some people got to see it quite clearly because they were near but most of the people that I spoke to just didn't get to see the collection. And
that defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
It doesn't. It's just, I don't know why there were like almost mature trees as part of this rooftop deck. There could have been spotlights in that. I don't know why. Maybe it was part of the mood. But the end result is that there were less sort of photos on social media, and it's all about sort of the social media photos. Georgia Alice, she can be forgiven since she's a newcomer from New Zealand. She had very dark lighting and sort of strobes, which people found disconcerting. So, but look, I mean, not everyone gets it right.
Yeah.
And of course, we had the unfortunate on Friday, a bit of wood fell backstage. I think the Telegraph had photos of it backstage at the Fijian Resort Collective sort of showcase. And look, it was just one of those sort of freak things.
A bit of controversy too over high heels.
High heels, that's right. Tony Matuszewski sent out his models in sort of sky high heels, which is of course not unusual for a fashion week.
But dangerous.
Well, given the combination of steps on the runway, and then they had this there was this fetish jewellery trend throughout the week, and he had sort of some of the models had their hands bound, and one model did fall, but not someone who had her hands bound, and I'm not sure it was really the most sensible thing. But that's not the organisers, that's the designers and their stylists making those sorts of decisions. But you do have to sort of think about OH&S.
Goodness me, well, definitely. It was a big week all in all, but all in all, you would say quite successful.
Oh, huge success, I think. I mean, everyone I spoke to, the buyers, really, they were just opening their sort of their buying books for the resort season. They say it's fantastic that I've actually seen this now. So it's like first cab off the rank, bring them down. And I think the publicity over the big brands showing, it makes people think that maybe it's not so crazy to get on a plane and come down to Sydney and experience this, fabulous sort of lifestyle.
Good start of something more.
Patty Huntington, once again, you have brought colour to our Sunday morning.
Thank you, Patty.
My pleasure.